All right, so I'm Anna Fisitzue. I'm also known as A Paper Florist on Instagram on the Minneapolis Craft Market. I'm a paper artist, and I focus primarily on flowers and botanicals. I like to create things that look real, so I look to nature and try and recreate what nature has provided us. I have been making paper flowers for almost 3 years. It's coming up on 3 years. And I found it one year when I was just browsing at a bookstore, and I found this book on paper flowers, and I thought, let me give that a shot. So since then, I have been just diving in, and that is what I do most. So you can find some of my work on the Minneapolis Craft Market online marketplace, where I have some items for sale. I also have a website at www.apaperflorist.com where I have a gallery. But today we're going to be making, or I'll be demoing this paper cactus. It has this lovely little flower on top. If you follow today's demo, it will also be recorded, so you can go back and watch it at your own pace. If you're interested in making one of these after you watch the demo, or if you already have purchased the kit is available on my Minneapolis Craft Marketplace online shop. So it has all the materials that you'll need to make this paper cactus. Again, it's recorded, so this demo will be about 30 minutes, and I'll go through all of the major steps, but you can go back at another time and do it at your own pace. This project in total takes about 2 hours, so I'll just be going through a lot of the minute steps, and you can follow me along in the video later if you'd like. So if you were to get a kit, along with the kit you would get some written instructions that give you a step-by-step as well as pictures to show how to go through this paper cactus, which is what I'll be doing today. You will get some crepe paper, green double-sided, it's called doublet crepe paper, and yellow crepe paper. And you have a choice with the kit of an orange flower or a pink flower. Today we'll be making the pink flower. And white, heavy florist crepe. So there's different types of crepe paper, and all three are represented here. We have the doublet, which is 2 pieces of fine crepe paper laminated together. The heavy crepe paper, which is a really thick, heavily creased crepe paper. And the flower is made of fine crepe paper. So it's all just different textures. Using them will give you different textures in a final product. Also in the kit, you will have some 18 gauge wire. We're going to be snipping them, so in the kit you get these shorter snippets of wire, a hot glue stick, some tacky glue, cotton balls, and a wooden handled sort of cheap craft bristle brush where they have these inexpensive bristles on them. So these are all the materials that come in the kit. At home, what you're going to need is some scissors, a hot glue gun, and if you don't have a hot glue gun, you can continue to use any kind of regular white or clear glue that you have. It'll just take longer for it to dry. A straight edge, so I like to use a ruler, but any kind of straight edge will work. And some sort of a scoring tool, so something that has a pointed tip, but not so pointed that you're going to rip the paper, because we want to score it. We don't want to rip through the paper. I also use this random tool that I found that's really helpful in almost every flower, is this metal cocktail. It's like a metal cocktail skewer, and I use it but literally on almost every flower I make. Another one that would be similar to this would be a hat pin or something along those lines, but it's a nice thickness, and it's round and it's pointed. There's all kinds of uses for this. So those are the materials that you'll need to create this paper cactus. So I will set these aside and we'll get started on the demo. And I'm gonna move my camera down so you can sort of see what I'm working on. So to start, we're going to start with the flower. And you're going to take some of this yellow crepe paper, and you're going to cut 4 inches wide by about 1.5 inches long. Measurements don't need to be perfectly exact, But with this paper, it's double-sided. One side is a lighter yellow, one side is a darker yellow. So it's your preference is what you would like to do. And when you cut it, you'll notice that there is something called grain. And if I can put it up, you can sort of see the grain there. It runs vertically here. So you're cutting across 4 inches across the grain and 1.5 inches with the grain. So we're going to fold this up hot dog style and pinch it as you go. So you've created a little hot dog bun. Take the white crepe paper and you're going to cut a 3 inches or 2 inch square. When you stretch it out, it should be about 4 inches. So if you go with somewhere between 2 inches across, 2 inches tall, that should give you enough. You are going to have this sit inside the yellow paper. So you want them to be roughly the same. If they're not the same, you can just trim off any excess. Now with your tacky glue, and again, if you don't have this glue at home, you can use any kind of Elmer's glue or whatever. You're going to apply glue on the inside of the edges of your yellow paper. You don't want it to be too much. You don't want it to be wet. You just want it to be enough to hold the papers together. So smear it all the way down to the edge so that you're sure when you put your white piece of paper in there, it'll be well adhered. So now I'll take my white paper and I'm going to bring the edge of the white paper all the way up into the yellow fold. Just like that. I'm going to press it so that it stays down. And I'm going to repeat that same thing, that same step on the opposite side. If you happen to have a brush handy, like a paintbrush, and you want to use that to smear your glue instead of getting it all over your fingers, that's a good way to do it. I'm used to having glue all over me. So then you'll pinch this down. And you want to give it a good squeeze so that it adheres well. We want these layers to glue up nice and solid. So since this is going to be wet, we're going to let this dry, but I happen to have one that I've already created. So this one is dried. It's the same thing as you can see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my really fine scissors. I use these for fringing. They're very small and sharp. They work really well. And I'm going to cut from the yellow to the white end, starting at the yellow, but I'm not going to cut all the way through. I need to leave about 1/4 inch so that it doesn't fall apart. I want this whole thing to remain a solid piece by not cutting the end. So I'm going to cut up just about like that. And I'll go across the whole edge. And I'm trying to get these to be as fine of a fringe as I can. I want them to be pretty narrow, about a 16th of an inch. If that's a little hard, 1/8 of an inch is fine too. I generally go pretty slow because it allows me to make really fine cuts. So you just repeat that step along the whole piece of paper. So I have one that's already been cut. Just like that, you'll cut the whole edge. Using my handy cocktail skewer, which you can use another one if you happen to have another one, or another item that will work for this. The edge of a scissor may work too. You're going to pinch your fringe very carefully and curl the top edge. What we're going for is a hooked edge. So I roll this over the tip. I roll the tip of the fringe over my skewer. And again, if you have scissors that you want to use, the important piece is that you hold the bottom of your fringe so you don't pull it out. Because if you pull on it too hard, it might rip off of the base that you've created. So going along the entire edge, curling it inward. And you want it to go all roughly in the same direction. So you'll have this shape. Once you have that done, you'll take one of your wires. This is about 2 to 3 inches. Here, maybe this will help. So it's about 2 to 3 inches long, and this is going to be the stem of the flower itself. So apply a little bit of glue. Again, we don't want to do too much glue because we don't want it to be soggy. And we're going to start wrapping it around the tip of our wire. So I pinch it on real good before I get going, and I do it just about 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch. So it's well on there. If you do it too close to the tip of the wire, it might pop off. So I try and make sure that I get it on there good, and it's not at risk of falling off. I pinch it, and then I wrap it around. And I'm trying to keep the fringe more or less, it sort of does what it wants, but more or less all pointing inwards. And I'm keeping the base of the fringe for the first few wraps. I'm keeping them level. So I'm not trying to bring them up or bring them down for the first few rounds. Then when I'm about halfway down, I start to wrap up the fringe just a little bit higher. So now the tip has come up, the base has come up, and I start wrapping it around that way. And what this does is it allows it to flare out a little bit more. And as you're wrapping, you just want to pinch it so that the glue sticks to it, itself, and it sticks to the wire on the inside. And again, you're reducing the risk of sort of the head popping off. So once you have that, you can gently open it up a little bit. And there you have the center of the flower. Now, since you're making this yourself, you can make it longer, you can make it so it's a nice tall, wide center, or you can make it smaller, you can make it thicker, however you want. You can totally customize it. So once you have that, you can move on to the petals. Now, I'm going to be using pink for mine, and this again is the pink crepe paper, fine crepe paper. And in the tutorial, you get a template for the petal. So that is in the tutorial. And when I'm cutting my petals, I like to fold up multiple layers at a time. So I'll take the paper, and however wide the petal is, I will try and mimic that, and I'll fold it so I get multiple layers. And one handy tip is just to hold it together with a clip so I don't have to worry about where my fingers are while I'm cutting. So you're going to cut 12 of these petals, and you're just following the template. So here I have cut 4. I don't do too many at a time, because when you stack those layers up, it can become too thick and the cuts don't go through well, but you could probably do more than 4. And then once you have those done, I use the edge of my scissors and I run it along the top 1/3 of the petal. And I do it so that it curves in. If anybody has done this to curl ribbon, it's along that same idea. So on the outer edge, about the top 1/3 of the flower, I run my scissors and give that curved inward effect. Then to get a little cupping shape, I hold the petal between my fingers, and with my thumbs, I just stretch out the center so that it's sort of like the belly of the petal becomes stretched. So you can see the petal shape forming there. You want to do it gently. You don't want to do it too much, because then it can become a little overstretched, or it can rip fairly easily. Now at the base, I apply just a little bit of glue. And holding the cupped piece of the petal between my thumb and my finger, I twist the other end. so that you have this, this stem. It's almost like a feather. And that will be your petal. So you repeat that step just about 12 times. If you wanted to do a third row, so you can see on this flower, I have 2 rows of flowers, so it's 6 and 6. But if you wanted to add another row, you would do just another 6. So that's another option when you're customizing your flower. So with the centerpiece that you've created, you're going to glue this feather-like stem edge to the base of your flower. So when you put your first one on, it doesn't really matter where it goes. You can just put it on anywhere. And you can use tacky glue if you want. You can put just a little bit of tacky glue on there. I like to use hot glue on this step just because it's a little bit faster and it holds quicker and I don't have to hold it. So I'm just going to put it at the base of my flower center. So it's sort of where all of those fringes are cut to. That's where I place my first flower or petal. And then you go around and you put all 6 evenly spaced, or as evenly spaced as you can get them. So that would give you something along these lines. So you can see that I have all 6 of my first layer of petals on there. So with your remaining 6 petals, which I have pre-cut here and pre-shaped, you're going to take your next layer of petals, apply your glue, and place them in between the first layer. There you go. So then you would go all the way around with the same idea, evenly spaced out in between the petals of the first layer. And if you were going to do a third row, I would probably just bring it back to where you put the first row. So in between the petals of the second row. So you get all of those done. We'll put them on. I'll just do them real quick so we have a finished flower here. And you can play with all kinds of petal shapes once you do it once, if you want to make them shorter and fatter or different colors. Look up pictures of cactuses and see what takes your fancy. All right. So once we get those on, we have our flower. But what we need to do is cover the base. We don't want to have the tails of those petals showing. So what we'll do is we'll take just a small strip of green crepe paper. So from the green paper that we have in the packet, I'll cut just about a 1/2 inch by 1 inch is probably going to be, 1 inch would probably be plenty. And this is just to cover the base of the flower. So I'll apply some glue. And again, just a little bit. It's that saying a little dot does a lot that we've all heard growing up. And wrap the base of the flower just to cover up the bottom there. So you don't see the layer, you don't see all the glue and the tails of the petals. And that's the flower. So we'll set that to the side and we'll move on to the cactus. So the cactus uses 2 pieces of green crepe paper. So you'll want to cut them to be the same width. So when you're cutting your paper, you'll notice that the grain is going vertically, and we're going to fold across that grain. So cut 2 pieces that are the same length, just like this. So you'll see that they're the same in their width. and in their length. And what we're going to do with the ruler is find about a 1-inch section. If you have a ruler, that's great. If not, you can also just sort of guesstimate where an inch is. So an inch for me, move that down. An inch for me is just here. And what I'm going to do is put my ruler down and either using the scoring tool, if anybody happens to have a scoring tool at home, you can draw that line. I happen to use my cocktail skewer, and I do a 1-inch score line. So you can see that 1-inch score line is just there. And I'm going to take my other paper, and I want to line them up and put glue all along the inside of that score line. So in that 1-inch section, I'm going to apply some glue. I'm going to spread it out again to make sure that I get it into all the folds and the creases of the crepe paper and just up against that score line. So as you can see, just inside that score line. So with its pair, now since it's double-sided, you want to make sure that you're using the same side. One is a brighter green, one is a darker green. In this case, I'm using the brighter green on the outside. So I'm going to line up the edge of my second paper right with that 1-inch score line and press down. Make sure that they get stuck together pretty well. So now they become more or less one longer piece of paper. So from this point, what I'm going to do is out from the center, I'm going to do more 1-inch score lines. So if I measure down another inch and mark it, I'm going to do a score line there. And I'll repeat that step all the way till the end. And again, I'm starting right at that center line that we created where we glued the two papers together. So you just continue this step, and you then do it on the other side as well, working your way out from the middle. So I have one completed. So I've done these score lines. You can see that it's now been accordioned. So once you have your score lines, what you'll do is bend them, just like when you used to make a paper fan, perhaps, as a kid. You'll go up and down, peaks and valleys, and make this paper fan appearing shape. So up and down, up and down. Once you have that created, you're going to take one of the edges and apply glue. And this is going to bring the cactus into its circle. We're going to close it up in this next step. So I'm applying glue the same way that I did when I was putting the two edges together in the middle. And I'm going to interlock them and press them down. So now they'll be creased together on the inside of one of the folds. If you call them mountain and valley, so it's going to create a valley shape here. So once that dries, you want to give it a minute to let it dry because it'll be important that it holds its shape. If you prefer using the hot glue, you can use the hot glue, but then you have to get your positioning just right the first time. So once you have this, you sort of have a star shape. Depending on how many score lines you give yourself, that's how many segments of cactus you're going to have. So in this case, I have 6 segments of cactus. But if you were to make a longer cactus and you wanted it to have maybe 9 segments, you're just going to do a few more score lines. So however many of the score lines, those equal however many segments of cactus you have. I wouldn't do necessarily less than 5. It would be a little bit more challenging at that point, but 6 to 9 is a good number. So once you have that section that glued down, what we're going to do is take these edges and we're going to fold them in by stretching. So grabbing about 3 inches of the top section, I'm going to stretch the paper and stretch the paper on each section, holding the middle piece and stretching with my other hand, bringing a curve to the top of the cactus. Really what I'm trying to do is make it at about a 90-degree angle from the side. So you can see here that I've stretched the cactus, and I'm going to end up making those tips meet. So what you'll do is you'll apply a little bit of glue. You want to make sure that they are standing up pretty vertically, the tips, before you glue it together. So you'll take a little bit of glue and just line the inside, and you can glue 2 sections together at a time. Glue, glue, and in the end, what you'll have is this shape. So you'll see where the tip is all coming together. Now, an optional step is to put in some cotton ball in the middle. So with these edges, they're relatively flat, which is perfectly fine if that's what you're going for. But if you want your cactus to be a little bit more bulging or thick, you can put a little bit of glue onto a piece of a cotton and then stuff it up inside those segments. So you'll see that they fill out a little bit more. So it's just based on what you prefer your cactus, your final cactus to look like. So you can use cotton balls or you can use just bath tissue just to put up inside there. Now that you have the cactus shape completed, what you'll do is you'll use your brush, and I pinch about 5, maybe 5 to 7 or 8 bristles at a time. And again, it's your preference how long you want them to be. I like to make them pretty long. These are about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, which is roughly the length of the bristles on the brush. So I pinch about 5, and I just cut them right at the base. And I make sure that I hold them all together, otherwise you're gonna have brush bristles all over the place. And I wanna try and keep their edges pretty close together. Now in this step, we glue them, and you can use tacky glue for this. You can apply a little bit of glue. You just have to hold it for a really long time. So I like to use hot glue. And so for this step, what I do is I take my hot glue gun and I just stick the end of the bristles right into my brush or into my gun. So I'm not really even pressing the trigger at all. And then I attach it. You have to do it while it's still a little bit wet. So then you attach it onto your cactus, and then you spray out the bristles. The more random, the better. And let that harden. So I've got my cactus with the first set of bristles on, and the less glue that you put on there, the more likely or the more possible it is for it to sort of come off, and you kind of have to find that balance between the amount of hot glue that you use so you don't have a giant glob of it there. But I think at the end of the day, whatever works for you is what's going to be best. So you'll just continue this step, snipping off of the brush and placing onto the cactus, spreading out the bristles as you go so that they are as randomly spaced as you can get them to be. So you'll just complete that step along all of the spines. This can take a little bit of time, but you'll find however you place them can increase the amount of time. So you can do the whole spine, which is a cool look if you've got the time for it. So you can put bristles along the whole spine. Here I have them spaced out about 1 inch. So I would do 1 inch all the way down. This one's about 1.5 inches or so. So it's just whatever is your preference. So once you have all of those spines placed onto your cactus, it's time to place our flower on. There's 2 ways that you can do this. You can either poke a hole right down the middle of your cactus, and you can slide the cactus stem right inside that hole, or you can glue into the side of one of these folds. So where the folds meet, you can just glue right into one of those spots. So there's 2 different options there. I like to put it right down the center because then you don't see it at all. And it stays in place, just like that. So you'll want to apply just a little bit of glue, just a tiny little dot at the bottom to make sure that the flower head stays in place and it's not moving around. And you can apply it before you put it in, just so that you know where you're getting your glue gun at. But that is how you assemble. And then you can find yourself a nice little bowl and stick it in your bowl. I like to put little river rocks inside mine, but that is step by step how I create a paper cactus. So I hope you enjoyed watching it, and if anybody has any questions, they can always reach out to me through my website at apaperflorist.com. And happy holidays.